everyone, and welcome to the March Coaches and Professionals program. This month, we're going to be discussing how to build relationships with your counseling or wellness center, which is a topic I personally am very excited about, and I know has been a huge focus for athletic departments around the country for the past few years. And I'm excited to delve into the topic to get more information from our two amazing panelists and their perspectives on this topic. So Alex, if you could start with introducing yourself, your job position, and why you're passionate about mental health or how mental health kind of plays into your job.
Yeah, so my name is Alex Sevastakis-Hall. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor at Denison University, which is a school in Granville, Ohio. So we're just outside the Columbus, Ohio area. I am really passionate about mental health personally and its connection with athletics because I was a student athlete as well. I grew up playing soccer and I ended up playing Division II soccer at a school in Ohio as well. And then I ended up coaching as an assistant coach through my grad program, always feeling passionate about counseling and not really knowing how I wanted to intertwine both of those things, my passion for sports as well as my passion for counseling. And that's when I sort of discovered the idea of being in a counseling center. So kind of being a part of a university center has been amazing because I've always been very passionate about helping people through life struggles, whatever that may be, but I've just kind of found a niche in wanting to help and offer extra support for student athletes and working with athletic departments through our counseling center to help kind of make services more accessible and destigmatize mental health services for athletes.
Okay, Jessica, I'll pass it over to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jessica Raniero. I'm currently the Associate Athletic Trainer at American International College, which is in Springfield, Massachusetts. This is my fourth year here. I'm also the Senior Women's Administrator for AIC for the NE10 conference. I work very closely with all of our student athletes. I'm one of 4 current athletic trainers in our athletic department. So we see a lot of athletes daily. We have 600-700 athletes. So we deal with, not only the physical side of injury, but also the mental side of injury. We deal a lot with mental health referrals and, triaging injury. And then, right along with it is mental health and the factors that go into, injury and being far away from home and maybe not having your mom right there to help you through every step of the way. So we work really closely with our counseling department as well and our other administrators within our athletics department to just grow and, kind of develop more of a focus on our mental health department as far as that relates to our student athletes.
Amazing. Well, I'm so excited to have you both and to hear both your perspectives. I'm excited to kind of hear both aspects of wellness center and athletic department. And I think you both will bring amazing perspectives to this topic. So Jessica, I'll send the first question over to you. Why do you think it's important for athletic departments to build their relationships with their counseling centers?
Yeah, I mean, when I first got to AIC, our counseling department was, very separate from athletics. And within the past 4 years, we've been able to kind of break down some of those barriers, which really were, time, resources, personnel. So I think it's incredibly important just from the aspect of, our student athletes are part of our greater community on campus. And that goes, for schools across the country. You want to provide the same resources for your student athletes as you do for your regular student body, and then you have obviously the time constraints that come with being a student athlete, the prioritization, the travel schedules, the study halls, the film sessions, the strength and conditioning. So we wanted to build mental health into the overall resources that were available to our student athletes. And we don't have the budget or, the personnel to do so. So building relationships with our counseling department through our athletic department were really important. And it was just, an essential part of trying to build relationships with the other side of campus, the academic side and the regular student body to try to, again, just put the resources out there, educate our student athletes on the availability of the resources. And then again, continue to put those faces in our community, our counselors, our sports psychologists, just continuously, show our student athletes this is, available to you should you be interested in utilizing these resources. So putting a name to the face and being able to bring those people on to the athletic side of campus and bring them within our athletic department and showcase them talk about their skills and their offerings was really important. And our student athletes now, know them by name and see them in our athletic training clinic and in our strength and conditioning department. So just being able to see them as people rather than seeking counseling or seeking help, and really kind of destigmatizing that was really important.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you mentioned budget, because I think that's a problem that a lot of universities around the country really struggle with. And there are those resources on campus, the wellness center, that don't require additional budget to specifically the athletics department. And I completely agree with everything you said. It's so important to utilize them. And again, it's helpful for budgetary reasons. Alex, I want to pass it over to you also with the same question, but also, how do you think a good relationship between a wellness center and an athletic department is not only beneficial for athletes, but also for like staff and administration, and beneficial for the counseling center as well?
Yeah, I really like, Jessica, the point you made about budget, because I feel like we're at a Division III school and budget definitely has something to play with it versus like bigger schools. Like we have Ohio State right down the road, and they have entire, mental health departments dedicated for their athletes. And that's just not the accessibility that our school has. But this can be really beneficial for coaches, staff, and administration for sure, because they don't feel like they're entering territory that maybe is not their specialty or in their scope, right? I think coaches feel a lot of pressure, and staff and administration, athletic buildings feel a lot of pressure that athletes are coming in, and trainers especially, they're coming in and they're getting not only physical injuries, but mental health injuries. And we don't ever want them to feel like they're working outside their scope, or they don't know what to say, or they feel like they have to make it up on the fly, and that they always have a close contact to get advisement or case consult or things like that, which we're always willing to offer a phone call or an email, or come down and talk to a team, or, depending on the situation, and offer those resources. So I think it can help really strengthen what coaches can offer their student athletes when it comes to their type of care, and trainers as well, to not feel alone in that battle, or feel like they're very like navigating uncharted waters when it comes to mental health. And it can be really beneficial for a counseling center, because I think for us, something we go over every year is, does the demographic of us students that we see match the demographic of our population? And athletes represent at Denison 33% of our population. So we want to definitely be seeing 33%, because we're looking at that in all our demographics, between male female ratios, people of color, LGBTQ, all of those things are definitely things that international students, we want to definitely be representing accurately the amount of students that are there versus like the different groups and demographics. So being able to have that strong relationship just really helps us feel like we're able to reach and see the people that need to be seen from athletics accurately. So having that kind of make it more accessible, destigmatize it, and again, just offer some insight and training for the staff and the athletes.
Definitely. One of our most recent panels was when to refer to a professional, like when coaches, athletic administration, like what situations they could possibly handle themselves and which ones they should go to a professional for. And all of our panelists heavily emphasized that they don't want coaches and administration to feel alone, and that there are resources around them if they feel like they need to use them, or even if they don't feel like they need to use them, but just really want a second opinion or just want some support in that way. So I love that you emphasized that point, because that was basically what that whole panel was about. So moving on, I know in my personal experience as a Division III athlete, our athletic trainers played a huge role in connecting athletes with wellness centers. And I think a lot of universities kind of have a similar sentiment to what mine did. But I wanted to ask you both, from your perspective, do you feel like there's a person in an athletic department that should initiate a connection between a wellness center? Do you think it should be the athletic director, or should it just be the athletic department as a whole? Maybe it should be on an individual basis for each coach to kind of get familiar with the wellness center. I kind of wanted to get both your perspectives on that. So Alex, if you could start of what you think might be the best method, or if there is one.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, I really like the idea of an athletic department kind of setting a standard of how they want mental health to be approached. So I really like the idea of an athletic director that's really supportive of what the mental health growth looks like, and really encouraging all their coaches to either have types of trainings or meetings or things like that, that definitely grow their knowledge and throw their perspective on things and be checking in on what they feel comfortable or not comfortable. But, if a coach individually wants to grow in a certain area or needs help with a certain area, then they feel like they can have that connection if they need to. But I think it can definitely be both, but I think it definitely needs to start with like, what's the set message or standard that the department wants to set for all of their coaches and all of their teams, so that everyone kind of has a very blanket way of approaching things, even though there's always individual cases, but overall that there is a level of tolerance and there's a level of wanting to work with students and not having one coach run a team, not taking those things into account and having another coach running, having differing rules and stuff when it comes to that type of thing. Because technically the athletic department and a lot of athletes run by very similar rules when it comes to the NCAA or NAIA, as well as, what are rules when it comes to other things. The athletic department kind of has blanket rules. And I think that would be really helpful with setting a good standard.
Jessica, I'll pass it over to you if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think the athletic director plays a huge role in developing relationships with, the wellness center, counseling center. Usually, I mean, as of right now, the trend is to kind of build a sports performance and, whether it's strength and conditioning, athletic training, the direction of sports medicine and athletic medicine and sports performance is very much encompassing mental health now. So a lot of the times the direction that many schools want to go is developing, whether it's a center for sports medicine or just as a department focus. So sometimes there is even a professional in that role, whether it be an assistant athletic director or a director for sports med and performance. So those people obviously play crucial roles in developing those relationships as well. I know my personal experience as an athletic trainer, I see athletes daily who I know would benefit from services. And sometimes we have the relationship enough to build that relationship with them and say, I think you would really benefit from services. We see them struggling physically, but we know that they're struggling mentally also. And I think some of the onus is again too on the coaches. Those coaches bring student athletes to campus. They're basically guardian on campus and they're responsible for them. And I think if you recognize, signs and symptoms of, something underlying, then it's definitely on the coach to obviously build some of those relationships as well. But if you want to involve mental health on your athletic department side of campus, it's necessary to have all hands on deck. So I think the conversation needs to start basically between anybody and then, bringing it to the authority administration side to say, hey, we need these services. We need to utilize what we have. How can we build it? Be creative, be resourceful, and then put it all together and let people run with it.
Completely agree. And I love the all hands on deck effort because I think that's a perfect way to explain it. Like Alex kind of mentioned, if one coach emphasizes it and another coach doesn't, I think that leaves room for athletes to kind of get lost in the cracks and things like that. So I completely agree. All hands on deck effort, and everyone should be involved in the conversation in some fashion. So for your particular universities, athletic departments, and counseling centers, what methods have worked well? If you feel comfortable sharing what methods may have not worked so well between your partnerships, is there anything you're currently working on? Alex, I'll start with you for that.
Yeah, so something that I've noticed had been working really well is that, again, kind of starting with the athletic director, is that at the beginning of the year, before the students come and before even preseason starts, they have like a coaches all day meeting and they bring the counseling center in. So we kind of get to do a little presentation for them, describing what we do, what are the services offered, how they can contact us, and kind of just start opening the door to communication. So that's always really helpful. With like starting that process right at the beginning of the year before the students even get there. And then the coaches are all in one room. All the coaches are there for a mandatory training. So they're all hearing this information and they have that opportunity to kind of ask questions and do things like that. So that's really worked. We do a lot of collaboration as well. So I've been able to do some trainings with some of the coaches on certain topics, as well as them being able to request certain questions from coaches that they want answered by the wellness center, that we've been able to kind of have an open stage to kind of answer those questions. So I feel like things have worked. Sometimes, yes, you go in a room and you're talking in front of coaches and you're like, anybody have any questions, anything like that? And sometimes you don't always get that reciprocal participation. So as much as you can kind of lead coaches to that information, it's kind of on them if they really want to apply that or take that. So sometimes that's where I see some of the barriers, because they're maybe being told they have to go to these meetings rather than volunteering to go to those meetings.
Jessica, how about you? Isn't there anything with AIC that's worked well or maybe hasn't?
Yeah. I mean, just to kind of, tailor what Alex is saying too, our coaches kind of either buy in or they don't, right? Like some of our coaches are so engaged in what our counseling center has to say, and brings the counseling center over to do team trainings and sensitivity trainings and just, goal setting and focusing and just some methods that will help them not only in their sports performance, but, in the classroom setting or in their own personal life. And some of the student athletes, again, some of them love it and some of them are like, oh, I don't need that. So I feel like when it is almost like forced, it does feel, educational and kind of like, oh, do I have to do this? And it's, it's like CPR training. It's like, you need it, but it's like, you got to sit through it at the same time. So I think there is that, there's that will for some coaches to really like buy in and know that this is going to be for the greater good. But some of the things that have worked really well for us are bringing our counselors and our clinical interns, honestly, over onto the athletic side of campus. We bring 2 clinical interns who are focusing in sports psychology into the athletic training room twice a week for a couple hours, like on a Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. And we try to schedule our more like long-term intensive rehabilitations for our injured athletes who are, going through surgery and season-ending injuries and all that kind of stuff. And they just so happen to be there during the time where our clinical interns are. So some of those conversations have really like spiraled into something great, a really great relationship where maybe that student athlete wouldn't have sought counseling, or we might have thought like, they're dealing okay, maybe they don't need that connection. But some of the conversations that I've even just like personally overheard, it just starts out as like, hey, what happened? Like, how's it going? And how do you feel? And it just turns into a really, really cool, like spearheading of, discussion and, well, how does it affect this? And so some of those conversations that now lead to like in-person meetings, in the counseling center have been just a really nice way to kind of get our student athletes not to see it again as counseling or as therapy. It's just a connection with another human being that is there to listen to them and give them feedback and provide them with just a sounding board sometimes. So that's worked really well for us. And it isn't, maybe the most private space, but I feel like our student athletes are social creatures, right? And they can be with their friends and with their teammates and with their athletic trainers where they feel safe. And now we're adding another person who is trained in, psychological human behavior and can actually have a conversation that will benefit them going forward. So that's been really huge for our department.
That sounds like a really, really cool program. We talk all the time, me and like some of my some people that I am friends with that are very big mental health advocates. And we talk all the time about how we think that using clinical interns is such a great idea. And you're actually the first person I've talked to that has a school that has implemented that. I know at my undergraduate school, we had a psychology program. They're all over the country, and these students need clinical hours. And I think that's a really great idea. So I love to hear that your school is implementing that, because that's the first that I've heard so far.
Nice.
So Jessica, I'm going to come back to you. It seems like both of your institutions are pretty good about, or have already started relationships between your wellness centers and your athletic departments. But for schools that are kind of just starting that relationship and are kind of just getting behind mental health and trying to support their athletes and currently have no relationship between the 2 departments, what is some advice you have for them to be able to initiate that connection? Like, what do you think would be a good first step?
Yeah, right. So I think, do a little bit of research, see what your school does have to offer first and foremost. I think if you are, a coach or even an assistant coach or a graduate assistant, somebody that your coaches or that your student athletes trust, you obviously are a really good person to advocate for that person's mental health. So I think, doing the research and being able to find out what does your school already offer. Is there free services in the community that you can outreach to and say, this is a large student body population. We're looking for, services. Is there a way, we can maybe work something out kind of contractual? And then, sometimes that helps as far as bringing that to your administration and say, look, I did all the legwork and this is what these, these people can offer us. So, I think, our institution is very small. We're, again, a private D2 school in Springfield, Mass. Our primary student population is athletes. So we knew that there was something kind of missing. So, the way we kind of got this started is, we had some of our athletic personnel essentially. So myself, our strength and conditioning coach, our NCAA compliance officer all serve on the AIC care team, which is concerns, assessments, referral, and education. So right now we kind of advocate for our student athletes who are maybe, suffering from a crisis, or, that somebody has submitted a report or, a concern about them as far as, maybe they're struggling with a certain thing that they don't want to divulge that information themselves, but somebody else is looking for them. So getting involved at the smaller levels of what you can really do in order to kind of build connections with those people across campus is kind of a really good way to get your foot in the door. And whether that's reaching out to, counseling yourself and just introducing yourself, hey, I'm the women's softball coach, and, I want to learn more about how we can provide mental services, mental help and, support to our student athletes. And then, another team sees like, oh, the counseling center is over with the softball team. Like, that's cool. I should do that for my team. So it kind of just spearheads itself, honestly, once you see the benefits. And then you can bring it to your student athlete, success board and your student athletic advisory committee, and those officers there. So I think just doing a little bit of the legwork, finding a little bit about what your campus does offer, getting involved at the smaller levels, building relationships with the counseling center in itself, and then maybe not from the get-go, like, hey, can you send 2 people over and do 10 hours a week in our athletic department? But, maybe like, hey, can we get, 4 hours a week, or is there a private space where students can meet with counseling services on the athletic, in the athletic building, or maybe in a setting where they feel more comfortable, so they don't feel like they're outreaching to a counseling center. So definitely, a lot of little intricacies that go into building relationships with people overall. But once you're familiar with some of those people who can actually help you get the job done, it kind of like gets the ball rolling and builds into something great. I mean, it really took us about 3 years to get it going to now where we're at. And I think we're just getting better and better year by year.
That's amazing. And Alex, do you have anything that you would add from a wellness center perspective of maybe ways that wellness centers could initiate that connection?
Definitely. It's also, I find it so interesting hearing Jessica's perspective from an athletic department side of
Yeah.
things. I really am on the other building, on the other side.
Right.
But no, I really resonate with a lot of the things you said. And I think that all counseling departments are having these conversations in our low times. So our low times before students come on breaks. And those are the times that we really try to take advantage of those types of collaborations with athletics as well as other groups on campus. We really try to reach out to all the different demographics on campus. So athletics is absolutely included in that. But kind of what Jessica was saying, I feel like a point of contact has been like a really big thing. I would say before I got to Denison, there was definitely still a good relationship between athletics and counseling. A lot of athletes were being seen, but kind of being, I feel like through my experience there and being kind of the named point of contact, that's really helped personalize it. The head athletic trainer there knows me by name and sends me emails asking questions or forwarding people to me. I've noticed coaches reaching out or calling, asking, hey, is Alex available? Can I have a call? And I think that whenever they have meetings regarding mental health, if they just send one of us or 2 of us down, they always make sure that I'm the person of contact that's sent down. So I've become the most visible person for them to see. And so it kind of becomes a trustworthy thing for them to see. They brought in a sports psychologist over the winter break that was going to just talk to the coaches. And they were like, hey, can you be the counseling point of contact down there? So I was able to stand up, reintroduce myself, and kind of offer to the conversation. So I think that that's something that really does help initiate that contact, is kind of having that one point person to build that trust between the departments. But from a counseling center perspective, at least from my experience, we always have meetings about how we can connect with the different demographics that we have on campus, and definitely the needs of all of those individuals, including our student athletes, is definitely a very big topic for us.
Definitely. I think the points of contact is such an amazing point. I think sometimes people can get overwhelmed, even in just regular day jobs where you don't know who to even start to reach out to. So you're like, I might as well just not because I don't even know who to talk to. So even just having one point of contact that can kind of point you in the right direction is really helpful. So yeah, I completely agree and love that Denison has been incorporating that. So we always ask all our panelists, what are some tips that you would give to coaches to help with their student athletes and their mental health? I know Mary, who typically hosts the panel, we do a lot of breath work at practice, and it's something that she loves and their team has incorporated. So I wanted to know if either of you have any tips that you think work best for mental health, whether or not student athletes, because I know Alex, you see more than athletes.
Yeah, I
No,
mean, yeah,
but
like I think, from our standpoint, I work with, a variety of teams. I work with football, I work with wrestling, I work with women's lacrosse. So like football, team sport, right? Wrestling, individual, going out into a mat, women's lacrosse, team sport. So the sports are obviously so different depending on who you're working with, the types of athlete that you work with on a day to day or see, even strength and conditioning coach are going to be very vastly different. And, everybody responds to coaching in tough situations differently. I love the idea of breath work. We actually teach health and wellness for athletes on campus at AIC, and we talk a lot about visualization and imagery and thought stopping. When we get negative thoughts or, oh my god, I can't believe I threw that pass, and then you're relishing in that moment, and how do you get rid of that and how do you move on to the next thing? So we don't always necessarily sit down with our coaches and say this is what every single athlete should do in this moment, but when they have a really more mental athlete, if you will, where they really struggle with how to get over those hurdles, we always try to say, let's have you sit down with the sports psychologist or the and just say, like, I'm struggling with this, how can this benefit me, what can this conversation help me learn about getting through those moments. And I think giving them a space to actually be aware of the things that they're doing. I think making mistakes is an obviously natural part of playing sport. If you're a coach and you're constantly on them for all these mistakes, they're going to be afraid to make them, which is going to make them very fearful of playing the sport to begin with. So giving them a safe space to obviously like get into this information and say like, oh, I'm really struggling with this as far as their performance, I think that can really benefit them so that they actually feel comfortable coming to you and talking about this information.
Definitely. Alex, do you have anything?
yeah, so my opinion on it is going to be maybe somewhat of a hot take. So the way that I view it is breath work is great. Mindfulness is great. I know our men's lacrosse team actually does yoga and they absolutely love it as a part of their program. And I think for me, because as a mental health professional, a lot of what I'm not necessarily a traditional sports psychologist, I don't have a sports psychologist background. So I understand sports psychologists are all about performance. I am definitely about challenging the athletic identity and diversifying that student athlete, that they are a person outside of being an athlete. Because I think so much we build so much of ourselves in that athletic identity. And as a college athlete, just the percentage of people that go on to continue playing their sport professionally is just so small. So it's like what a coach can do best is working with their athletes on making sure that their athletes are whole people and not just athletes. So really focusing on how are they taking their rest days? Do they need a mental health day? Giving that to them as optional mental health days that they can take throughout a season without consequence. Opening up that door for that conversation and really checking in with their athletes to make sure they're okay. They may not be tripping up about a mistake here or there on the field, but they may be tripping up about the fact that they are almost failing a class and that they might be eligible for their sport, or they have a lot going on at home, or they're struggling with depression or anxiety that has absolutely nothing to do with their sport. Their sport could be the most grounding thing that they have. So I think sometimes it's really being able to change the language, talking to your athletes and what are they doing outside of their sport that is helping them? Like, oh, where are you checking in? Or what are the other things you have going on? Or opening them up to other hobbies or other things on campus that don't necessarily involve athletics. I really am trying to work with injured athletes specifically. And the one thing they always tell me is, I was doing fine. And then once I was injured and I couldn't exercise anymore, I didn't have any coping skills. Because once your sport goes away, once you can't run, once you can't lift, they don't know what to do because they've been relying on that their entire life. So at least for me, I know that performance is very, very important. I was very, very motivated to be a big performer when I was an athlete, but I also struggled with the transition as a senior, finishing my sport and not really realizing who I was outside of being an athlete anymore. So really, that's my tip for coaches, is that your athletes are more than just athletes. They are there to perform for you, but they're also there to get an education and be a person. So really challenging them to have rest, to have those breaks, to advocate for those breaks, and really who they are outside of that sport.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. That was not a hot take in my book.
Yes, that's a tough conversation to have with coaches sometimes, because they want to see them perform, and everybody, every single athlete every day you're expected to perform in the classroom, with your tutoring sessions, in film, on the field. So that's really tough, for sometimes for coaches to just be like, well, why weren't you at your best today? And it is a very hard conversation, I think, for coaches to have. So that's a very welcome perspective, Alex.
I know it's not the most welcome for coaches.
Yeah.
But it is the reality that, yes, your job is built in your performance of your athletes, but their job is not built in, their longevity is not built in that. It's about developing well-rounded athletes who can use the skills they learn in their sport to be successful adults after they leave college. Because at the end of the day, the student comes before the athlete as, oh my gosh, how long has that been beaten into our brain?
Ingrained, yes.
You are a student first. So it's so interesting that sometimes the coaches mix that up, and they really demand a lot of their athletes and demand them to almost be an athlete first, almost before being a person. So that's my take.
Yeah, one of our next panels is about how coaches can help their athletes transition into life after sport, because that is a huge topic that the Hidden Opponent really wants to emphasize, because it's something that a lot of athletes struggle with. I know I personally did struggle with it. So that will be upcoming, and hopefully we will provide some more information on that topic and get more perspectives from both coaches and counselors, and as many perspectives as we can provide, we'll try and have for that topic, because I think it's really important.
Yes, it really is.
So last question I have for you both, I guess it's not really a question, but if people want to receive more information from you, or if you would rather not share like your email or whatever, if you have any mental health advocates that you would recommend, so if you have like a social media presence, you could share your social media, or if you would recommend any person that you think coaches should look at online that you think provides some good information on mental health.
Yeah, I mean, if like, I know I've had like colleagues of mine, former, from either my, days when I was a collegiate athlete, I've talked to some of my former teammates that are now coaches, and they're like, well, what should I do in this situation? And I'm like, I'm not a counselor. I'm not like, it's like, I'm not trained in this, but like, they see the work that we've been able to do at this level, where we're talking about building relationships with, the staff that you do have available. So especially if, we have other institutions listening, or any kind of administrators listening to how can you build those relationships, I'm more than willing to have a conversation. We can, put out my email. It's just on our website. If you look up AIC athletic training, my email's right there. But if not, it's Jessica.Raniero, and my last name is RANIERO @aic.edu. And I'd be more than happy to answer any emails that come my way.
Yeah, I don't have anybody specifically that comes to mind. Again, I feel like there are so many people doing the work. Denison's brought in sports psychologists to talk about people with backgrounds in eating disorder treatment and how to go about working with your athletes regarding those specific issues, and along with other experts. So there are a lot of experts in the field. There are a lot of things that you can find and resources you can find. There's a lot of people that are very passionate, not only about this work, but have the research behind it. My name and my email is a nightmare. So to spell that out would just be an absolute nightmare. I'm open to any questioning, but I might just need to like list it at the bottom, because I don't know. That would spelling it wouldn't help anybody.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So I'm open to emails if anybody has any questions or concerns about anything. I actually run a support group at my university for athletes in transition. So this is athletes who've either quit their sport, retired or are suffering from injury and currently out of their sport that are looking for that type of support and really working on challenging that athletic identity and what that transition looks like out of their sport. So I did not say that at any point, but the reason why is that if anyone is interested that hears this and maybe starting something like that, or what an outline of that group would kind of look like, I can definitely provide that if they reach out to me.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to get this panel out there and hear what the public has to say. But thank you both so much again.
Yeah, really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
Thank you.